So what about Darwin? Having rejected the God of the Bible and the possibility of supernatural input into the universe, all Darwin had to work with were natural processes. Except, I would say, in my own mind, natural processes have a supernatural quality to them. I mean, everything's composed of atoms and molecules, right? And those are supernatural. Their behaviors, some of them are just flat out not understood. It would take a supernatural being right now at this time to explain how matter holds together this whole world. So some things we understand, natural processes, well, are understanding, not necessarily natural, the parameters by which we think, I guess you could call it. Well, anyway, these led to what Darwin admitted himself were absurd conclusions. But if there is no God, there remains no other choice. Only absurdity remains after God has been ruled out. Isn't that interesting? But he didn't catch on to that himself. He said, the existence of suffering and death has led many to abandon the concept of God, including Darwin. But to one who accepts the Bible's teachings on these foundational issues, there is no need to embrace solely natural processes as creator. In fact, you'd have to go beyond natural processes as we understand them. Certain things. Electricity has wave properties and matter properties. That's supernatural. How does that happen? We can't explain it. Back in the old days, they had less understanding, less technological capacity. No matter what, we can't explain things all the way through, as if a creator could. So we're not creator, and the creator is supernatural. Get over yourself. Darwin could not. The following question and answer article appeared in the New American Magazine. Question: the gradualism of Darwinian evolution has come under fire recently. Punctuated equilibria, a more recent attempt to explain the lack of transitional forms in the fossil record, is presently being offered by such notables as Stephen Gould and Niles Eldredge. This theory postulates that evolution occurred rapidly in small isolated populations. No record was left of the evolutionary process in the fossil record because the changes were so rapid. Well, how do you know they were there if there's no evidence? You can't make a statement about something you can't provide evidence for. How do the most recent theories square with known scientific fact? Well, Morris says, Dr. John Morris, one of the biggest problems that evolutionists have always faced is that there are no transitional forms. There is no recorded change from one basic type of an animal into another. This was a major problem to Darwin. In his book, The Origin of Species, he dedicated a good bit of space to the lack of transitional forms. Well, if there's nothing there, how can you dedicate a good bit of space to them? He said, I don't know. I don't know. He said that it was the most obvious and serious argument that could be marshaled against his theory. Well, there's no theory. It's some kind of a speculation. Theory means, if it's scientific, the word theory demands scientific, repeatable, observable, and falsifiable. If there's nothing there, you can't falsify nothing. You can't repeat nothing. You can't observe nothing. You're talking absurdities. Darwin assumed that all living things today had come from a common ancestor and proposed a possible scenario whereby that might happen. Question: the failure to discover transitional fossils since Darwin's time has proved to be an embarrassment to evolutionists, hasn't it? The fossil record does not record any transitions from one basic type of animal into another basic type. But, in spite of the lack of evidence from the fossil record, evolutionists insist that such transitions have taken place. It is their presupposition. They know that evolution has taken place. How do you know? You've got to have evidence. To these scientists who accept the theory of punctuated equilibria, well, it's not even a theory, as I said, because theories by definition have to be repeatable in order to be observable, in order to be provable. Creation is not in man's capacity to be repeatable. So evolution is an hypothesis, a model of what happened, and so is creationism. Which is the best hypothesis? Creationism. To these scientists who accept the theory of punctuated equilibria, the lack of transitional forms proves then, so the evolutionists say, that evolution took place rapidly and left no transitional forms. Question: isn't that a broad assumption for some evolutionists to have made? Answer: their frustration comes from the fact that they have already assumed evolution to be true. That's not a scientist. He looks at evidence and then adds it up. Or does he? It seems to me that the fossil record is much more in favor of the creation model. A creationist would predict that there would be no transitional forms in the fossil record because the Bible says clearly that God created the basic kinds of animals all at once. They did not evolve from other types of animals. Since basic animal types did not come from other animals, no in-between animals ever existed to leave fossils, and the fossil record would contain these huge gaps. And they do. The creation model demands that the fossil record looks like it does. But the evolutionists have assumed that creation is not to be considered. How do you rule that out? And so they are limiting their scope of investigation to these mechanisms within their own worldview. In doing so, in my opinion, they have denied truth and are doomed to languish in empty speculations such as punctuated equilibria. Stephen Gould sounds, I've read some of his written stuff, so smart, but yet he's saying things that are dumb. So the lack of transitional forms is behind the need for new theories, models, to explain evolution. If it is true that evolution has happened, then you must propose some kind of mechanism that allows evolution to take place without leaving transitional forms, for there are no transitional forms. The world's leading paleontologists, fossil scientists, all admit this. Punctuationists presuppositionally hold that we are all descended from a common ancestor and prove their brand of evolution from lack of data. The fact that we have no data proves unpunctuated equilibria in their minds, their logic. Or is it logic at all? Presupposed. Fact number 1, evolution has occurred. Presupposed. Fact number 2, we have no transitional forms. Therefore, evolution occurred rapidly in isolated populations and left no translational forms. Obviously, this is an argument from lack of data. Who presents a scientific point of view in this matter in other subjects? I don't think anybody does. I'm not going to get published, but here they widely published. Doesn't the scientific method demand that theories fit observable facts and evidence, and not the other way around? A. Science. Answer. Science deals with the present. We study chemical processes, biological life, fossils, and so on, in the present. The only thing we have to access to is the present. Scientists make measurements and observations in the present. Now, when scientists want to talk about the past, they may study the present and make inferences about the past based on what they see. But they cannot study the past. Every piece of data in the modern world has to be interpreted, but you cannot interpret it completely free of any bias. Scientists are all biased and prejudiced people, just like anyone else. When scientists attempt to interpret the past, the scientific method doesn't apply. Who can observe or repeat the Big Bang? Who can repeat the origin of life? It just doesn't happen. You can't do it. So it is outside the realm of empirical science. I say it's outside the realm of science because science is empirical. You have to observe things, report them, repeat them, right? And falsify them. That's all done in the present. Scientists can believe by faith, one way or the other. That's not scientific. Once you set up your worldview, then you can study the present world and see if the present world fits your way, your worldview says that it ought to be. Why isn't creationism considered the stronger model, since it fits the facts so well? Answer: creationism isn't even considered by many scientists. Scientists ought to be willing to investigate all possible solutions to a particular problem. Unfortunately, evolutionary scientists today have decided that anything that is of a supernatural nature is to be excluded from the realm of possibility. The definition of science used to be the search for truth. These days is the search for naturalistic explanations. In other words, the supernatural is presuppositionally excluded. Of course, a supernatural creator implies a personal thinking transcendent God, a concept many refuse to accept. Many scientists now faced with the overwhelming scientific objections to a completely naturalistic evolution, are turning to an extra-natural as opposed to a supernatural explanation, which runs to the same thing. How do you call the God particle natural? Because the presumption is based on data. The only answer is something supernatural happened. But we're not going to call him God, we're going to call him a God particle. Consider Dr. Francis Crick, who won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of DNA, who now claims it is impossible for life to have evolved here on Earth given the natural laws that we observe. It couldn't have happened, the way the evolutionists say. So Crick, a brilliant world-class geneticist, now claims that life came here on a meteorite, came from outer space. Isn't that kind of like a God? Something outside of the natural, something came from outer space. It means, in a way, that we don't have an explanation for. Isn't that beyond the natural, supernatural? Sir Fred Hoyle, the famous astronomer in Britain, is now saying the same thing, as are many scientists. They call it transpermia, that life rode here on a meteorite, or was brought here on that something out there, has done it, but not God. The problem with that is, something on that meteorite, a transpermia thing, couldn't have been like other things that were on the planet before life existed, because that would be not natural, something supernatural. So if you want to call it God, let it be called God, but the plausibility of that happening is a lot less than what the Bible says, right? Too many things this transpermia had to do. This begs the question, who created life on the meteorite? Yeah. Question, in a recent ICR newsletter, Henry Moore stated, the neo-Darwinian religionists, Huxley, Davinsky, Dewey, and so on, thought that evolutionary gradualism would become the basis for the coming world humanistic religion. Evolutionists of the new generation, on the other hand, have increasingly turned to punctuationism or revolutionary evolutionism as the favored rationale, largely because of the scientific fallacies in gradualism increasingly exposed by creationism. This development has facilitated the amalgamation of Western scientism with Eastern mysticism. Do you also see this happening? Now, Eastern mysticism is mystical, not natural. It's just a lot of nonsense. A naturalistic evolution just doesn't work. Evolutionists everywhere are beginning to recognize and are beginning to look for other answers. Many are turning to the paranormal. Isn't that supernormal? And to the cosmic. Isn't that supernormal? Why don't you just pick God of the Bible? And to other sources to salvage the theory of development, still without recourse to a personal creator. Yeah, it's so obvious. The answer demands a personal creator, a designer, that does things in a personal way, the way science is, the way humanity is. A personal creator had to create that. Finally, evolutionists fail to answer a number of critical questions. If the moon is billions of years old like the Earth, how come the astronauts only discovered a few thousand years of dust everywhere on the surface? 2. The first law of thermodynamics is one of energy conservation. Energy is